Guruve Gaur Chandraya Radhikaya Tadale Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tadabhaktaya Namo Namaha Vanchakalpaturubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Shri Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nanavat Pranam devotees. Want to answer two questions if it's possible to do so this morning. One question, which I may deal with first because it may be a shorter answer, and then I'll try to do a second question, which is a little more expanded of an answer and probably a little more of a discussion. So the first question, I'm just paraphrasing the question. Devotee wrote and asked me to do a question and answer session on the relationship between Srimati Radhika and Bhakti Devi. So in brief, we can understand that Bhakti Devi and Srimati Radhika are not two different realities, that Bhakti Devi is the Prakash as both a Shakti and as a Prakash, meaning expansion, directly of Srimati Radhika as a person. So Bhakti Devi is both the person and also the Shakti, which is inherent in the practice of Bhakti, whether it is sadhana Bhakti, and sadhana has two divisions, of course, Raganuga Bhakti or Vaidhi Bhakti, but either one, the energy that's inherent in that practice is Bhakti Shakti. And I think I've explained before that within the Panchatattva, that Bhakti Shakti appears as Sri Gadadhar Pandit, who is also a Prakash of Srimati Radharani. So, without that Bhakti Shakti, it's not possible for the Jiva to become imbued with the internal energy, which is a combination of the Ladini Shakti and Sambit Shakti and Sandhini potency. So, that Swarup Shakti, its vehicle of descent into the heart of the Jiva is via the agency called Bhakti Shakti. That Bhakti Shakti is the only means to actually awaken the natural dasitva, means natural devotional constitutional position of the Jiva. Without the descent of this Bhakti Shakti, then by any other Shakti, the Gyan Shakti, or Shakti which may be derived from any other kind of practice like Gyan, Yoga, Tapasya, Vairagya, right? Any of these other practices can reveal, right? And some Bhakti Shakti must be there also, because you cannot do anything without some kind of devotion. But it is not Bhakti Shakti in the form of the Swarup Shakti. So those Shaktis may reveal the difference between the soul and the body. So one will come to the position of Atma Ananda, that I'm realizing my soul is different from the body, and inherent in the Atma is Dukkha Pratiyogitva, the absence of misery. So now having realized through Gyan, the Shakti of Gyan, that I'm not this body, I'm not part of the material arena and its various designations, etc., I'm realizing my Atma, but not my Atma in relation directly to Bhagavan. So this state is called Atma Ananda, and because it's Dukkha Pratiyogita, it is free from misery, there is a great sense of bliss. But because there's no locus standi in the spiritual arena with a spiritual identity in relation to Bhagavan, therefore it's mentioned that it is possible from that Atma Ananda to again fall into the material arena, generally in the mode of goodness. And I think it's mentioned in the verse, Ye ne Ravindakshavi Mukti Manunis Tvayastabhavat Abhishuddha Bodhaya. So in this verse, obviously it's mentioned Padantya Do Yushmad Nadrita Angraya, that one can again fall down into the material world. Now, especially this verse is related to those who, in having Atma Ananda, either consider themselves to have become Bhagavan or seek to merge into the existence of Bhagavan and have the vad or the theory that whenever Bhagavan himself, who is absolutely and transcendentally the absolute reality, whenever that reality appears within the material world, it is a feature within the mode of material goodness and is covered by Maya as well. Right? So this is what Mayavadis believe. That's what they call Mayavadis. They have the vad, the theory, that whenever Bhagavan descends into the world, Shri Krishna, Ramachandra Bhagavan, or any form of Bhagavan, that form has appeared within the material mode of Sattva Gun, and therefore has some contact with Maya. Right? So they're called Mayavadis, and due to the nature of the aparad inherent in that conception, they certainly fall down from any position gained by the Gyan Shakti of realizing simply they're not part of the material arena, but that they're actually spirit, soul, and they're free from misery. Right? Beyond that, those who may have realized the potency of Bhagavan in the form of his Jyoti, Brahma Jyoti, and who seek entrance into that Brahma Jyoti in the idea of merging, but not considering that they've become Bhagavan, but just that they've merged into this Brahman, then that position is called Brahma Ananda. And according to Sanatana Goswami Pad Brihad Bhagavatamrita, even from that position, one can be elevated into Seva Ananda in a relationship with Bhagavan, right? And there really is no fall, technically, from that idea of Brahmananda if it's void of the aparad that's inherent in Mayavad. So I hope this is clear. I'm not expert sometimes at making all these things clear, but I hope that's somewhat clear. And then, of course, the ultimate thing is when one is imbued with the Shakti coming from the internal potency, which is manifest as Bhakti Shakti or Swarup Shakti. Really, they are in many ways synonymous, right? And that the revelation that takes place as a result of the practice of devotion is that the actual spiritual identity of the jiva, according to the nature of their relationship with Bhagavan, is revealed by that Swarup Shakti, by the descent of that Swarup Shakti. So without that Bhakti Shakti, Swarup Shakti, this could not happen. So, and that Bhakti Shakti is directly the Prakash of Srimati Radharani herself. So hopefully this answers that devotee's question regarding the nature of the relationship between Bhakti Shakti and Srimati Radhika. I'm certainly, more senior devotees, more experienced devotees can elaborate on that either in the comment section, or they may direct you to another video or lecture or something, right? And there's certainly more that can be said about it, but I'm trying to also incorporate the other question as well. So the other question arose from a recent podcast that I did after a very long time because of scheduling and various things on both of our situations. Namras Prabhu, who I have great affection for, I think the idea of having a podcast like that covers such a wide spectrum of topics and personalities who are in the Vaishnav Mandal, I think is really to be lauded. I've seen very wonderful podcasts, and I think for a lot of people it gives a great deal of hope about the future, because you see even many younger devotees, younger in age, so to speak, and their insight and maturation and so forth comes on display in the way he's able to have exchanges with them, as well as just very interesting topics from the realm of Bhakti Tattva or Siddhanta, all the way down to contemporary social issues, etc., etc. Sometimes they're also just personal interviews, which I think my podcast with him was a combination of both things. It was kind of a discussion on my own personal life and entrance into Bhakti, as well as dealing with philosophical issues. So I was extremely happy, because I always wanted to have an opportunity, just because I liked the podcast so much itself, regardless of whether I was ever on it or not. That wasn't a big thing, but just to have the opportunity to have the exchange and to share, because I admire seeing the life and variety and sweetness of so many various devotees who've come on. So anyways, to get to the point, in the course of that podcast, a particular section came up regarding something that I've spoken about before, and I think I've done video on before, which was the fact that now, as devotees, as a whole, we're kind of living in a more porous environment in terms of our society. Regardless of what Sangha you belong to, there are more devotees who have more dealings with the material world as they're navigating their unfoldment in Bhakti. And as a result of that, they come in contact with a lot more influences, and also due to social media and other things, than previously when devotees' ashram life was pretty insulated. Like I mentioned, from 4 o'clock in the morning or 3:30 in the morning till pretty much 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, there was a very set schedule. There was very little interplay with the external world besides whatever outreach was going on, whether it was Harinam or preaching or book distribution, whatever it might be. But pretty much there was an insulated lifestyle, right? So now having this more porous environment, many different conceptions and so forth have come into the Vaishnav circle, and in many cases there are sort of disputes about how they fit, and naturally a kind of division arises. But this is the nature of Kali Yuga, right? That in seeking out either to reconcile them or just understand whether or not they are concepts which can be vetted and validated as having any kind of relationship to Bhakti or not, it gives rise to a lot of discussion and disagreement and so forth and so on. So anyway, let me get to the point. Point being, in the course of that podcast, a discussion came up that regarded how these things have influences, and one example was through ideals regarding how people look at particular issues like social justice issues. And in looking at those social justice issues, I made the point in the podcast that where that cracks the foundation of our understanding of practicing Bhakti, the foundational understanding of practicing Bhakti is, I'm not the body, right? And in order to do bhajan life successfully, that foundational principle has to be not filed in a cabinet with many other things, but it has to be the core understanding. Asava upadi vinaya muktam, right? That in order to render service, I have to have conviction and ultimately then realization that I am not, upadi means any designation within the material world. That all the designations that are here are the results of a continuum of a karmic unfoldment, and each time a particular nuance of a hamkara is dressed with a particular designation, and that's all attached to the physical elements of earth, water, fire, and ether, and hence we get a material body related to that, and we live out some kind of karmic drama in relation to all of that. But the core understanding that I'm not the body, right? And I mentioned in the podcast that we kind of reaffirm this. I didn't recite the entire verse, but before we recite our Guru-given mantras, something which is called Bhukta Suddhi is done. And this is by recitation of one prayer. There are different ways of doing it. In our particular line, one Bhukta Suddhi is Naham Vipro Narapati Napivashona Shudro, etc. So this is a verse that describes I'm not Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishnav, Sudra, I'm not Brahmachari, Grahastha, or Sannyasi, etc. But rather, I am the servant of the servant of the servant of the master of the gopis, right? So this idea, Gopi Bharatupada Kamalayora Dasha Dashanudas, is the affirmation side of who I actually am. And before undertaking the very mantras given by Sri Guru to help me realize that, I affirm in my own consciousness that I accept and believe that I'm not any upadi related to this material body. And therefore I'm taking shelter of these Guru-given mantras and Sri Harinam and Harikatha in order to realize what I'm affirming, right? So I said it would be a kind of spiritual schizophrenia to then turn around and fully imbibe and accept a particular upadi because of a connection with, you know, some material circumstances, whether it be social justice issues or anything else, and thereby, you know, sort of then reaffirm, no, I am the body, and I have a connection to this social justice issue or this thing or that thing, and it's because I am a black man, I am a Latino woman, I am a, you know, this or that, whatever it might be. So I did not, however, dismiss the idea that social justice and social justice issues are in the relative sphere or relative arena something that organically, just as human beings, we resonate with the idea that exploiting people, marginalizing people, harming people, victimizing people is wrong. Just within the material mode of goodness, if anyone, you know, is living predominantly in the mode of goodness, it'll be a natural resonance that these things are wrong and are abhorrent in many cases. So no one's dismissing that. At the same time, there's not the need to fracture the foundation of I am not the body, to become overly absorbed in that and create an idea that either the fact that I'm not the body is in competition with that, and hence you get terms like spiritual bypassing, etc., or in that particular instance, or the idea that there's an absolute necessity that everyone has to be on the same page and the same ideal about dealing with social justice issues, right? Or somehow or another they are wrong, right? Right? So we do have to have some sense. And also, more directly to the comment that I received from someone, was that they did not see a quote separation between these two things. They considered the absolute value of looking at social justice issues to be equated with the idea, or not contradictory to the idea, we're not the body. So I'm not arguing that point, but I don't ascribe that the nature of what happens within the temporal world and within the karmic portfolios of people individually and the collective karma of places is absolute. It's not. Srila Prabhupada gave an excellent example, maybe not Srila Prabhupada, but someone else quoted an example when they were talking about the issues of the British occupation of India. And they mentioned how during the time of the obvious rebellion against that one sadhu brought up the idea that yes, you know, they could understand the relative appreciation that the karmic situation as it is should be dealt with. The occupation by people of another people is wrong, etc., etc. At the same time, when that sadhu pressed the person he was speaking to that the solution could be found within Bhakti by taking people off the bodily platform and bringing people to the platform of understanding that you're actually a servant of God, which would then create a true environment where the idea of exploiting someone, etc., etc., could be mitigated. Because if you realize that I'm actually a servant of God, this person is a servant of God, that person is a servant of God, then where is the tendency to exploit them? You have to be on the bodily platform to even think that, well, I want to exploit this person for my purposes because I'm identifying as this body with this desire, etc., etc., and to fulfill that, even if it means exploiting someone else or marginalizing someone else, I'm willing to do that for the satisfaction of my own temporary material body, mind, and makeup. So no, the answer clearly that this sadhu was mentioning was that the bringing of people to the platform where they realize they're not the body is the answer to dealing with those issues. So to see the issue as something separately to get involved in, and even to the point of fracturing, as I mentioned in the beginning, or compromising, if that's a better word, the inner understanding that I'm not the body, and that the consistent practice of my bhajan is dependent on that foundational understanding, to say I can then have like a separate category where I do identify with the body. Yeah, I am a black man, Latino woman, Indian, person with a particular gender affiliation, etc., or particular gender understanding or sexual orientation, whatever, to then identify with all of these things, it is a kind of spiritual schizophrenia, or will lead to a kind of spiritual schizophrenia, or at least it'll lead to the unfulfillment of the true dynamics of unfolding to your real spiritual identity in bhajan life. You cannot have an idea, I'm not the body, but I am the body. That cannot simultaneously exist. So the person in their comment wrote that in the Jain doctrine, they found that there is an idea where both of those things can exist. They didn't really quote that directly, but they said there is the idea that there can be simultaneously two things which are absolute, right? So I said, yeah, that certainly could be true, but one of them is not that you're the body, but you're not the body, right? We have a body. That body is the result of our karmic unfoldment, right? It does not in any way, shape, form, or fashion indicate that though we have a body, we are that body. Because the entire theology of Bhakti describes how these bodies are acquired, the fact that they're temporal, the fact that they're not directly related to the soul, that they're acquired by a karmic action and reaction pattern, right? So, no, there is no simultaneous idea, I am the body, but I'm not the body. Now, the fact that we're not the body, and we're reaffirming that in our day-to-day practice in Bhakti, doesn't mean that we don't observe the karmic reality that's present before us and just dismiss all prudence in relation to anything with the body we've acquired by karma. It doesn't make the body the soul, but we do act prudently in relation to the body. So the idea that we do not accept people being marginalized, victimized, etc., as I mentioned before, doesn't then make the body the soul. You understand what I'm saying? My essential point is that we can't conflate the two things, right? Nor can we have the spiritual schizophrenia of identifying with the body in order to make a emotional investment or whatever kind of investment, I may not be describing that properly, but any kind of investment into dealing with social justice issues. One way to do that would be to rather carry our understanding of who we genuinely are into the arena of contribution and solutions to social justice issues. What is the real solution to social justice issues? That people's consciousness has to change. It's not a matter of simply calling it out. It's not a matter of simply identifying it. That may be part of it. But then when it comes to the solution, after you've called it out and identified it, is what? Now, there's a whole range of activities that go on in relation to these things, but the fact that it has gone on for so long indicates that people's consciousness essentially, or the consciousness within the social fabric really hasn't changed. So if one has a posture in unfolding in Bhakti where the foundational principle is you're not the body, within our society or outside the society, we should give emphasis to that point. We're not the body, but that we're actually all servants of God, because this is the absolute and common platform under which we can agree not to be exploitive of each other. This is the platform where we can agree that victimizing people is wrong, right? You can relatively do that also, but you can't create a genuine solution to it unless and until people's consciousness changes. If the consciousness doesn't change, what is it that removes that idea of being exploitive or being a victimizer? What changes in a person if their consciousness doesn't change? And going to war against these things with other relative means, right? Like calling out, etc. That's fine, but it will never replace the idea of really bringing in a change of consciousness. Therefore, the greatest social justice reformer of our time is our Srila Prabhupada. Because he genuinely took people from all kinds of walks of life with all kinds of karmic packages and backgrounds and brought them together under a banner of realizing that they weren't the body. that they were in fact servants of God and successfully navigated a methodology by which they could come together and realize it and practice it. Now, of course, in their own individual unfoldments, a lot of imperfections may have come out. But overall, he was successfully able to do that. Whereas no other institution, or I'm not saying spiritually speaking here, but no other material institutions, whether it was, any kind of unity organizations or even the UN or whatever it might be, have been able to successfully navigate that. Srila Prabhupada brought that up himself. He was able to genuinely bring people together from all over the world under the banner of being servants of God and not this body. So there's not a dichotomy here. At the same time, my point was, as a reality regarding our practice in Bhakti, you cannot have an idea, I am the body, but I'm not the body. No, I'm not this body. Now, my contribution and my calling out, my looking out or whatever of social justice issues, etc., doesn't negate that fact. You understand? My methodology for bringing solutions to it is, though, to make other people aware, yes, well, we're not the body. And that firm conviction on our behalf translates into the method of solutions we take towards dealing with those sort of things. Simply because we feel bad about it, and therefore we call it out or protest about it, etc., which I'm not saying if anybody has that inclination they shouldn't do. I'm saying that the ultimate solution is a change of consciousness, and the reality in that change of consciousness that people have to come to the point of not being the body and identifying that they're servants of God. Other than that, the material world with all of its collective and individual karma is going to continue to play out in the same fashion. You can look all the way back in history and you'll see it. And I don't, of course, see that where any predictions in Sastra anywhere have said in the future, this is not going to happen. People will be able to come to a point of complete harmony. Like if you look under what is called Ram Raj, or the rule of Lord Ram, that kind of, in general, lack of exploiting, etc., was there because you had divine rule. So wherever you have divine rule or godly rule, then the tendency is that those things become suppressed or eradicated. But just in the general material, atmosphere where people are all working out their individual desires and karma and all these kind of things, there's naturally always going to be conflict, and there's also going to be naturally the tendency, because in the material consciousness, the tendency for cheating is there. There are 4 defects, one of them is the tendency to cheat. So people will always have the tendency to try to find a way to exploit and victimize others for their own benefit, subtly or grossly. And of course, those who find themselves karmically in positions where they have more facility to do so without God consciousness may take advantage of that. So anyway, this was very long and very protracted and maybe even a little confusing. But my point being that you cannot say the idea that being the body and not being the body, that can simultaneously exist. Because they are 2 separate realities, right? One is relative, whatever particular karmic package you have right now, and one is an absolute eternal reality, that I'm not the body, I'm a servant of God. So no, those 2 things don't have some mutual alignment. Now, if you found something in the Jain doctrine that convinced you that maybe there is something like that, first of all, I'd like to see the context of that statement in Jain doctrine for one, but also I take shelter of the statement of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He says, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Madamidam Tatra Adaro Na Paraha. That we don't particularly give so much adara, means regard, to the opinion of others, as opposed to the opinion of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's Bhagavan himself. And I also would then say, where within our own canon or theology do you find the idea that the body and the soul, you can simultaneously cultivate the idea on both? So I don't know if I'm wrong on these statements that this person is making, and I'm not mentioning names. Obviously, if they see this video, they know who they are. And I did write to them directly in the comments on YouTube regarding it. But, if you find something in our theology or within our Sastric canon that says, no, yeah, you can simultaneously contemplate you are the body and not the body, I would like to see it, right? So I'm not saying that in any, and hopefully you don't take it in any offensive way or any challenging way. I'm speaking just maybe passionately but earnestly that I think it's important, because I think our Vaishnav circle as a whole needs the reinforcement that the process that we're following, which is foundation and you're not the body, needs to be there. That we can't allow any cracking or fracturing in that essential foundational concept to be there, because then trying to build a deeper understanding or a deeper conception or a deeper level of realization about bhakti would be very difficult. And it will also, if that becomes infiltrated so much into the social body of Vaishnavas, then many opposidantic ideas and corrupt ideas with the conflation of all these things will come about, as we're seeing now to some degree. All right. So again, I think there was a little bit of maybe confusing, because I was genuinely trying to find a way to express all of these things, right? And for Prabhuji, you asked me the question about Bhakti, Shakti, and Shrimati Radhika. I hope also that answer was at least sufficient. We can always discuss more. All right, my Dandavat Pranam devotees. Always a Srila Gurudev, Srila Prabhupada, Arupanuga Guru Varga, Jai Vanchakalputuruvischa, Kripashinduvevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hope everyone is having a wonderful, by the way, Navadvip Dham Parikrama, and looking forward also to Shri Gaura Purnima. Jai Radhe Radhe.